Hello, we are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we've been listening to this audio book of the Quran, a new translation by N.J. Darwood, for roughly a week now. And it interests us because of the many different claims, both from the religion of Islam and people in the West. This new translation is by N.J. Darwood, so we have no clue who that guy was. We did ask a question in the comments. So, is this the most accurate translation into English available on YouTube, with no twisting it to hide certain things, etc., which may upset unbelievers or infidels, as Islam calls them, or people in the West, non-believers, etc., in their different statements? And so, if Injil is declaring Jesus Christ, or means Jesus Christ, or points to Jesus Christ, it won't be twisted to hide that fact, because we did come across another video quite a while back where an ex-Muslim scholar who had converted to Christianity told Christian Life Ministries on the street, maybe in America somewhere, Canada, that Injil was actually talking about Jesus the Christ. Okay, so we're having a look at this guy N.J. Darwood to clarify who he was exactly. Born Nassim Joseph Darwood, 27th August 1927 to 20 November 2014. He was an Iraqi translator who is best known for his translation of the Quran. Nassim Joseph Darwood was born in Baghdad to a Jewish family. His family name was Yehuda. Okay, that's Judea, isn't it? Or the Jews took their name from these first three letters, right? And they were called Jews in the Middle Ages. So I guess they ran with that, perhaps. But in the Iraqi tradition, his legal name consisted of his own given name, plus those of his father and paternal grandfather, Nassim Yosef, or Joseph David. He changed David to Darwood when he was granted British nationality in the 1940s. His non-diplom, or his AKA name, was N.J. Darwood. Bilingual in Arabic and English, he started tutoring schoolmates in English. He came to England as an Iraq state scholar in 1945 and studied English literature and classical Arabic at the University of London, and the first cohort of students to resume normal university studies after the Second World War, and so forth. He is associated with the founder of the Penguin Classics, Dr. E.V. Rue, CBE, and a person called Lane, Sir Alan Lane. He was actually the founder of Penguin Books. His translation of the Quran is still thought to be the best-selling English language version. It has been reprinted at least 70 times, appearing in several revised editions and formats. For N.J. Darwood, the Quran was a lifetime, quote, work in progress, unquote, constantly revised and refined in the course of an entire career. Language and use of English change constantly over time. For example, terms such as men and mankind did not have the same gender-specific connotations for the reader of the 1950s that might apply today. Darwood's translation has never been out of print. A newly revised edition was published in May 2014. N.J. Darwood's approach to the Quran is that of a scholar approaching the greatest work of classical Arabic literature, free from any religious bias. He greatly admires the Quran's eloquence and powerful rhetoric, describing it in his introduction as not only one of the most influential books of prophetic literature, but also a literary masterpiece in its own right. In his translation, endeavours to do justice to both. The translation includes explanatory footnotes. Dawood has also edited and abridged the Muqaddimah of the great philosopher historian Ibn Khaldun, published by Princeton University Press and described by Mark Zuckerberg as, quote, one of the 23 books everyone should read, unquote. He has retold some of the best known stories of the Arabian Nights in 3 children's books in the Puffin book series. So that's basically it for N.J. Dawood. Okay, we're going to look at Muhammad, because there's a lot of controversy in regards to Muhammad and the Quran. Okay, born Muhammad ibn Abdullah, around about 570 and died 8 June 632 CE. Was an Arab religious, social and political leader and the founder of the world religion of Islam. According to Islamic doctrine, he was a prophet divinely inspired to preach and confirm the monotheistic teachings of Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus and other prophets. Well, actually Jesus in a sense was polytheistic, because he spoke of his father God the Father, and himself being one, being part of the Godhead and being divine, even though he put his divinity aside when he was born, and he was God incarnate in the flesh, and so forth. He is believed to be the final prophet of God in all the main branches of Islam, though some modern denominations diverge from this belief. Muhammad united Arabia into a single Muslim polity, which means it's an identifiable political entity, any group of people who have a collective identity, who are organized by some form of institutionalized social relations and have a capacity to mobilize resources. A polity can be any other group of people organized, and so forth. So Muhammad united Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, a peninsula of Western Asia, etc., etc. But notice with this word here, it has on the end ia or ear, which is a end suffix, which means that, well, if you define it, it's a loan word, a Greek loan word, Greek Latin loan word, which basically means that these people were the possessors of a region or a language, if it has the IC, Arabic. So in reality there was no Arabia, no Arabic, and no Garabia either. Okay? It's just a region that these people happen to possess or be occupying. Okay, so Muhammad united the Arabia into a single Muslim polity, with the Quran as well as its teachings and practices forming the basis of Islamic religious belief. Muhammad was born approximately 570 CE in Mecca, son of Abdullah and Amina. His father Abdullah was the son of Quraysh tribal leader Abd al-Muttalib bin Hashim, and he died a few months before Muhammad's birth. His mother Amina died when he was 6, leaving Muhammad an orphan. He was raised under the care of his grandfather Abd al-Muttalib and paternal uncle Abu Talib. In later years he would periodically seclude himself in a mountain cave named Hira for several nights of prayer. When he was 40, Muhammad reported being visited by Gabriel in the cave and receiving his first revelation from God. An event described in Islamic tradition as taking place in AD 1610, during which the Islamic Prophet Muhammad was visited by the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, known as Gabriel in English, who revealed to him the beginnings of what would later become the Islamic, or the Quran, and then the religion. Muhammad started preaching those revelations publicly, proclaiming that God is one, that complete submission, or Islam. That's what Islam means. An Abrahamic monotheistic religion teaching that Muhammad is the messenger of God is the world's second largest religion behind Christianity, with 1.9 billion followers, or 24.9% of the world's population known as Muslims. Muhammad started preaching these revelations publicly, proclaiming that God is one, that complete submission, or Islam, to God is the right way of life then, and that he was a prophet and messenger of God, similar to the other prophets in Islam. Muhammad's followers were initially few in number. They experienced hostility from Meccan polytheists. For 13 years they had many other gods. The new Muslims were often subjected to abuse and persecution. The persecution lasted for 12 years, beginning from the advent of Islam to Hijrah. Muhammad preached Islam secretly for 3 years, then he openly preached Islam. To escape ongoing persecution, he sent some of his followers to Abyssinia, the kingdom of Aksum, also known as the kingdom of Aksum, or the Aksumite Empire, was an ancient kingdom from the 2nd to the 10th century, with its capital at the city of Aksum, or Aksum. The kingdom was centered, probably, I'm not really sure. Anyway, he sent some of his followers to Abyssinia in 615 before he and his followers migrated from Mecca to Medina, officially Al-Madina Al-Munawwara, commonly simplified as Medina or Medina, is the second holiest city in Islam and the capital of the Medina province of Saudi Arabia, then known as Yathrib. Later in 622, this event, the Hijrah, which is a medieval Latin transliteration of the Arabic word meaning departure or migration, among other definitions. Alternative transliterations of the word include Hijrah or Hijra. The word is commonly used to refer to the journey of the Islamic people, followers, right? And this marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar. The Islamic, Muslim or Arabic calendar. A lunar calendar consisting of 12 lunar months and a year of 354 or 355 days. It used to determine the proper days of Islamic holidays and rituals. So it wasn't a lunar solar, it was lunar. Yeah, following the movements of the moon. Also known as the Hijra calendar. In Medina, Muhammad united the tribes under the Constitution of Medina. We may have a look at that at a later date, in a later video. In December 629, the Constitution of Medina, also known as the Charter of Medina, was drawn up on behalf of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad shortly after his arrival at Medina in 622 CE, following the Hijrah from Mecca. Okay, so in December 629, after 8 years of intermittent fighting with Meccan tribes, Muhammad gathered an army of 10,000 Muslim converts and marched on the city of Mecca. The conquest went largely uncontested, and Muhammad seized the city with little bloodshed. In 632, a few months after returning from the farewell pilgrimage, he fell ill and died. By the time of his death, most of the Arabian Peninsula had converted to Islam. The revelations, each known as Ayah, literally sign of God, which is a verse in the Quran, one of the statements of varying length that make up the chapters, surah, of the Quran, and are marked by a number in the Quranic context. The word means evidence, sign or miracle, and in Arabic, I guess, literally sign of God, that Muhammad reported receiving until his death, form the verses of the Quran regarded by Muslims as a verbatim word of God, the official words of God, on which the religion is based. Beside the Quran, Muhammad's teachings and practices, Sunnah, found in Hadith and Sirah biography literature are also upheld and used as source of Islamic law. You'd have to look into Sharia. Okay. A religious law forming part of the Islamic tradition. It is derived from the religious precepts of Islam and Islam. It is based on the sacred scriptures of Islam, particularly the Quran and Hadith. In Arabic, the term Sharia refers to God's immutable divine law. Okay. There's some more information there. The name Muhammad means praiseworthy and appears 4 times in the Quran. The Quran also addresses Muhammad in the second person by various appellations: Prophet, Messenger, Servant of God, Abd, Announcer, Bashir. So maybe that's where that House of Consciousness Imam Bashir, they usually choose a name, right? Change their name, like it might be Red Pill, Blue Pill, Black Jesus, you know, they go under a different name, pseudo, right? So Imam Bashir means he's like a leader in the Islamic faith, and he's announcing something, right? Anyway, it talks about the Quran. The Quran is the central religious text of Islam. Muslims believe it represents the words of God revealed by the Archangel Gabriel to Muhammad. The Quran, however, provides minimal assistance for Muhammad's chronological biography. Most Quranic verses do not provide significant historical context. His early biographies, the Hadith, pre-Islamic Arabia, his childhood and early life. And what we'd like to get at is there's many people out there in the West that really give Muslims a hard time about Muhammad. Okay. In his teens, Muhammad accompanied his uncle on Syrian trading journeys to gain experience in commercial trade. Islamic tradition states that when Muhammad was either 9 or 12 while accompanying the Meccan caravan to Syria, he met a Christian monk or hermit named Bahira, who was an Arabian Nestorian or possibly Gnostic Nestorian monk. Okay, so that would be something to do with Nestorius, who had a debate with a Roman Catholic called Cyril over Nestorius's claim of the Christ being hypostasis, or both the God or divine and man. So he was called a heretic, etc., etc. And later on, the original Apostolic Church of the East, founded by Thomas, with the assistance of Addai, Thaddeus, Bartholomew, and Peter, founded this church in the East. And these high priests of that church at some point said, well, we agree with what Nestorius stated, that Christ had 2 natures, 2 substances. He was both divine and human. So because of that, they said, well, you know, we don't hail him as the founder of our church, right? Because later on they were called Nestorians, erroneously called Nestorians, right? They said, we acknowledge him because he's saying something that we believed thousands of years before. So they were, because of that, they were labelled by the Roman Catholic Church, etc., as heretics and persecuted, and they've been persecuted for 18 centuries, I might say 20 centuries now, because they were still being attacked by ISIS, kicked out of their homes, etc., because the Kurds, who claimed that they were the original inhabitants of Syria, etc., northern part of Syria, were pointing about, you know, because they had a dislike of them. So that's how the Taliban or ISIS figured out where they were and kicked them out of their houses, etc., etc. So this particular church, having the original manuscripts given to them by Thomas, who when the Church of Jerusalem was destroyed, temple, etc. They fled across countries, went to China, India, probably went on to preach in Japan, etc. Before Thomas, etc. were martyred. So they gave them these, whatever they supposedly heard and saw and someone wrote down. Thomas or someone grabbed these manuscripts and took off across those lands, founded that church, and he gave it to the high priests, who then hid it from the Roman Catholics, knowing that they'd probably get hold of it, destroy it, and put those people to death. Right? And, they'd take those texts and you never see them. Right? They'd hide them in their vault, whatever, as they did. And also from Islam, they hid from Islam. But Islam was just basically after the land. So Islam came in and said, right, you can live under peace, under Islamic rule, but you can't have any like idols, etc. right, in your churches. So they got rid of these idols, or these things these figures they venerated. Okay. Take note of that, they venerated them. And changed everything to icons. And so they lived in peace under that Islamic rule to a certain time when these nasty caliphates arose and they persecuted them. Then they were persecuted by Genghis Khan and the Mongols, Islam and others throughout the centuries, so they kept running. Until today, where there's a revived apostolic church who still follow those customs, traditions, etc. of the original apostolic church founded by Thomas, etc. So Bahira was an Arabian Nestorian. The Nestorian church erroneously being called that for centuries and centuries. They got used to it. So yeah, they say, well, yeah, you can call us Nestorian. One guy, one of these patriarchs, says, yeah, if you keep calling us Nestorian, we're going to have to go to war. But they've accepted it because that's a label, much like Christian, that's been put on them for centuries and centuries, so you just go with it. Okay, so Bahira was an Arabian Nestorian, or possibly Gnostic Nestorian monk, who, according to Islamic tradition, foretold to the adolescent Muhammad his future as a prophet. His name derives from the Syriac Bahira, meaning tested, etc. Here's the history of Muhammad. Several years later, according to a narration collected by historian Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad was involved with a well-known story about setting the black stone in place in the wall of the Kaaba in 605. The black stone, a sacred object, was removed during renovations to the Kaaba. The Meccan leaders could not agree which clan should return the black stone to its place. They decided to ask the next man who come through the gate to make that decision. That man was a 35-year-old Muhammad. This event happened 5 years before the first revelation by Gabriel to him, the angel Gabriel. He asked for a cloth and laid the black stone in its centre. The clan leaders held the corners of the cloth and together carried the black stone to the right spot. Then Muhammad laid the stone, satisfying the honour of all. At the beginning of the Quran, which I've already covered. Sahih Bukhari narrates Muhammad describing his revelation as sometimes it is revealed like a ringing of a bell. Aisha, that was his youngest wife, reported, I saw the Prophet being inspired divinely on a very cold day and noticed the sweat dropping from his forehead as the inspiration was over. According to Welch, some guy called Welch, Alfred T. Welch, a professor of religious studies at Michigan State University. Welch got his PhD degree in Arabic and Islamic studies, blah blah blah, according to him. These descriptions may be considered genuine since they are unlikely to have been forged by later Muslims. Muhammad was confident that he could distinguish his own thoughts from these messages. According to the Quran, one of the main roles of Muhammad is to warn the unbelievers of the eschatological, a part of theology concerned with the final events of history. or the ultimate destiny of humanity. This concept is commonly referred to as the end of the world, or the apocalypse, or the end times. So, the end time punishment, they will be judged by God, etc., etc., for their disbelief. And that's in the Quran 38:70, Quran 6:19, and so forth. Opposition. According to Muslim tradition, Muhammad's wife Khadija was the first to believe he was a prophet. She was followed by Muhammad's 10-year-old cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib, close friend Abu Bakr, and adopted son Zayd. He began to preach around 1613 to the public, the Quran. Most Meccans ignored it and mocked him, though a few became his followers. There were three main groups of early converts to Islam: younger brothers and sons of great merchants, people who had fallen out of the first rank in their tribe or failed to attain it, and the weak, mostly unprotected foreigners, and so forth. According to Ibn Sa'ad, opposition in Mecca started when Muhammad delivered verses that condemned the idol worship and the polytheism practiced by the Meccan forefathers. However, the Quranic exegist maintains that it began as Muhammad started public preaching. As his followers increased, Muhammad became a threat to the local tribes and rulers of the city, whose wealth rested upon the Kaaba, the focal point of Meccan religious life that Muhammad threatened to overthrow. Muhammad's denunciation of the Meccan traditional religion was especially offensive to his own tribe, the Quraysh, as they were the guardians of the Kaaba. Powerful merchants attempted to convince Muhammad to abandon his preaching. He was offered admission to the inner circle of merchants, as well as an advantageous marriage. He refused both of these offers. Tradition records at great length the persecution of and ill treatment towards Muhammad and his followers. Sumayya bint Kayat, slave of a prominent Meccan leader, Abu Jahl, is famous as the first martyr of Islam, killed with a spear by her master when she refused to give up her faith. Bilal, who was one of the most trusted and loyal Sahaba, companions of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad. He was born in Mecca and is considered to have been the first Mu'azzin in history, chosen by Muhammad, and so forth. And it says something here about there's a completely different story on the reason why the Muslims returned from Ethiopia to Mecca. According to this account, initially mentioned by Al-Waqidi, then rehashed or rewritten by Ibn Sa'ad and Tabari, but not by Ibn Hisham and not by Ibn Ishaq. Muhammad, desperately hoping for an accommodation which this tribe, pronounced a verse acknowledging the existence of three Meccan goddesses considered to be the daughters of Allah. That would be Allat, A-L-L-A-T, who was supposed to be pregnant, and so forth. Don't know the rest of them, just remember that from reading Czech publications, that one of them was called Allat, A-L-L-A-T. Supposedly, on House of Consciousness, polite debate on the street with Imam Bashir, he says this was originally Allah's name, Allat, because the H was interchangeable. But do your personal research on that. We're just going by what they said on that. Imam Bashir, I think, said it was rubbish, etc., etc. Muhammad retracted his verses the next day at the behest or the request of Gabriel, claiming that the verses were whispered by the devil himself. Instead, a ridicule of these gods was offered. This episode, known as the story of the cranes, is also known as satanic verses. According to the story, this led to a general reconciliation between Muhammad and the Meccans. So this guy that came out with that satanic verses, I've forgotten his name, where singer Cat Stevens, aka Jewish Islam, made threats against them, and there was a lot threats made against that guy's life. Is it Salman Rushdie? Yeah, he came up with that, revealing of satanic verses. Okay, and there's plenty more here. And his wife dies, and he has a second wife, and then I don't know what happened to her, and then he marries a third one, a younger one, which is the source of Western people, Christians, etc., or trolls or whatever, pointing their finger at Muhammad, saying, oh, he was this, he was that, because he married her so young. So it's recommended by Rabbi Toby Singer in one of his videos for the best information from a Muslim, famous Muslim cleric is Al-Tabari, because apparently he knew the Quran at a very early age, say 9, something like that. He can recite every word of it apparently. Don't know how he'd do that, because listen to this audio here, which is 11 hours long and in English. Imagine it in the Arabic, and that guy knowing that completely, right? So this guy Al-Tabari is supposed to be the best one to actually learn from. His most influential and best known works are his Quranic commentary, known as in Arabic as Tafsir al-Tabari, and his historical chronicle history of the prophets and kings, Tariq al-Rasul wa al-Muluk, often referred to as Tariq al-Tabari. I think this is what Toby Singh was saying, that Christ wasn't the Messiah, etc. He was a prophet, like he was the highest Rasul in Islamic thought. Al-Tabari followed the Shafi'i madhab for nearly a decade before he developed his own interpretation of Islamic jurisprudence. What is that? Often described as a human understanding and practice of the Sharia, that is, human understanding of the divine Islamic law is revealed in the Quran and the Sunnah, etc. Al-Tabari's school of thought, Madhab, flourished among Sunni ulama for 2 centuries after his death, before it eventually became extinct. It was usually designated by the name Jariri. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the relationship with the younger Aisha. Okay? That all the Westerners, Christians, etc., the trolls, scholars, whoever, point the finger at and saying, oh, he was this, he was that. Okay? Here's your full name there, also transcribed as Aisha. Was Muhammad's third and youngest wife. In Islamic writings, her name is thus often prefixed by the title of Mother of the Believers, referring to the description of Muhammad's wives in the Quran. Aisha had an important role in early Islamic history, both during Muhammad's life and after his death. In Sunni tradition, Aisha is portrayed as scholarly and inquisitive. She contributed to the spread of Muhammad's message and served the Muslim community for 44 years after his death. She is also known for narrating 2,210 hadiths. In Islam refers to what the majority of Muslims believe to be the record of the words, actions and the silent approval of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad, as transmitted through chains of narrators. In other words, the hadith are transmitted reports about Muhammad, what he said, how he was, etc. Not just on matters related to Muhammad's private life, but also on topics such as inheritance, pilgrimage and eschatology. The aspect of Islamic theology incorporating afterlife and the end of the world, with special emphasis in the Quran on the inevitability of resurrection, the final judgment, and the eternal division of the righteous and the unrighteous. Okay. Her intellect and knowledge in various subjects including poetry and medicine were highly praised by early luminaries such as Al-Azuri and his student, that name is it. Her father Abu Bakr became the first caliph to succeed Muhammad, and after 2 years was succeeded by Umar. And supposedly he was it Umar or Oman? Oman. One of them was like, you know, the Islamic or the Muslim army wanted to totally wipe out their oppressors or their attackers, the killers of their many peoples, women and children, etc. But he said, "Come on, man, we're not like that, you know." And he was actually quite a nice guy. Like he let certain Roman officials or whoever they were attacking Jerusalem at the time to leave with as much gold as they could carry. They weren't allowed carts, that sort of thing. They just had to carry it, or if they were allowed to convert to Islam, etc., etc. And it's either him or Oman. Okay, and then goes on a bit more about her, and this is what we are trying to get to. She participated in the battle by giving speeches and leading troops on the back of a camel. The Battle of the Camel. Yeah, the Battle of the Camel. Also known as the Battle of Jamil or the Battle of Basra. It took place outside of Basra, Iraq in 36 A.H. 56 CE. The battle was fought between the army of the 4th Caliph Ali on one side and the rebel army. She ended up losing the battle, but her involvement and determination left a lasting impression. Because of her involvement in this battle, Shia Muslims, second largest branch of Islam, it holds that the Islamic Prophet Muhammad designated Ali ibn Abi Talib as a successor and the Imam after him, most notably at the event of Ghadir Khan, but was prevented from succeeding Muhammad. Yeah. They have a general negative view of Aisha. Afterwards she lived quietly in Medina for more than 20 years, took no part in politics, became reconciled to Ali and did not oppose Caliph Muawiyah. Some traditional hadith sources state that Aisha was betrothed or married or engaged to Muhammad at the age of 6 or 7. Other sources say she was 9 when she had a small marriage ceremony. But both the date and her age at marriage and later consummation, check out the word consummation, what does that mean? In many traditions and the statutes of civil or religious law, the consummation of a marriage, often called simply consummation, is the first act of sexual intercourse between two people, either following their marriage to each other or after a short or prolonged period. Okay, but both the date and her age of marriage and later consummation with Muhammad in Medina are sources of controversy and discussion among scholars, because they're not really sure if that was true or not. They're always debating over it. She was born 613 or early 614, daughter of Ruman and Abu Bakr of Mecca, two of Muhammad's most trusted companions. No sources offer much more information about Aisha's childhood, so there's very little to go on. Marriage to Muhammad. The idea to match Aisha with Muhammad was suggested by Khawla bint Hakim after the death of Muhammad's first wife. After this previous agreement regarding the marriage of Aisha with this other guy here was put aside by common consent, Abu Bakr was uncertain as, quote, as to the propriety of even legality of marrying his daughter to his brother. Muhammad, however, responded that they were brothers only in religion. British historian William Montgomery Wyatt Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies at the University of Edinburgh, suggests that Muhammad hoped to strengthen his ties with Abu Bakr. The strengthening of ties commonly served as a basis for marriage in Arabian culture, so it had some motive or agenda behind it. There was no official registration of births at the time that Aisha was born, so her date of birth and therefore the dates of marriage cannot be stated with certainty. Her age is not mentioned in the Quran. All discussions and debate about her age at marriage rely on firstly the various ahadith. Hadith or athar in Islam refers to what the majority of Muslims believe to be a record of the words, actions and the silent approval of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad as transmitted through chains of narrators. In other words, the hadith are transmitted reports about Muhammad, which are regarded by most Muslims as records of the words and actions of Muhammad and as a source for religious laws and moral guidance, second only to that of the Quran. Unlike the Quran, not all Muslims believe that all ahadith accounts are a divine revelation, and different collections of ahadith are given varied levels of respect by different branches of the Islamic faith. Sunni, various branches of Shia, such as Ismaili and Twelver, Ibadid and Ahmadiyya, Muslims all regard different sets of ahadith as strong or weak in the power of the evidence, depending on their perceived provenance. Aisha's age at the time of her marriage is frequently mentioned in Islamic literature. According to John Esposito, Italian-American academic, professor of Middle Eastern and Religious Studies and scholar of Islamic Studies, who serves as Professor of Religion, International Affairs and Islamic Studies at Georgetown University in Washington, USA. Aisha was married to Muhammad in Mecca in 624 CE after Hijrah. To Medina in the Battle of Badr, the day of the criterion in the Quran and by Muslims, fought on Tuesday 13th March 624 CE. Several scholars interpret this to indicate that she reached puberty at this age, although her age at the time is a subject of dispute. Okay, so there you go. Although her age at the time is a subject of dispute, they're still arguing over it. Al-Tabari says she was 9 at the time of her marriage. Al-Tabari says she was 9 at the time of her marriage, was consummated. Sahih al-Bukhari's hadith says that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. But all biographical information on Muhammad and his companions was first recorded over a century after his death. But the hadith and seerah, traditionally Islamic biographies of Muhammad, provide records of early Islam, though an unbroken chain of transmission. Various hadith stating that Aisha was either 9 or 10 at the time of consummation came from collections with Sahih status, meaning they are regarded as reputable by most Sunni Muslims. Other traditional sources also mention Aisha's age. The Seerah of Ibn Ishaq, edited by Ibn Hisham, states that she was 9 or 10 years old at the consummation, so they're all verifying that she was quite young. The historian Al-Tabari also states that she was 9. Marriage at this young age was not unheard of at that time, and Aisha's marriage to Muhammad may have held a political connotation, as her father Abu Bakr was an influential man in the community. Abu Bakr, on his part, may have sought to further the bond of kinship between Muhammad and himself by joining their families together in marriage via Aisha. Layla Ahmed, an Egyptian-American scholar of Islam, notes that Aisha's betrothal, or engagement and marriage to Muhammad are presented as ordinary in Islamic literature and may indicate that it was not unusual for children to be married to their elders in that era, because people die young, right? Die in childbirth, die of disease, etc., like that. Okay, so before anyone sticks their finger out and points, ooh, Muhammad was this, Muhammad was that, take into account that apparently Joseph in the New Testament married, or was betrothed, engaged to Mary, who was quite young, maybe 14, 15. Okay. This is according to what we've heard from denominations like the Seventh-day Adventists, who pointed that out. He might have been 44, she might have been 14, but you'd have to go do your personal research on that to prove that it's fact. Aisha's age of marriage has been a source of controversy and debate. People argue over it, and some historians, scholars and writers have revisited the previously accepted timeline of her life. Some writers have calculated Aisha's age based on details found in some biographies, eschewing the traditionally accepted hadith. One hadith recorded in the works of some medieval scholars, including Dahabi, states that Aisha's older sister Asma was over 13 at the time of her marriage. Gibril Haddad criticises this approach as relying on a single narrator, and notes that hadith from the same narrator gives a broader range for the age difference between the sisters, using reports on the birth of Fatima as a reference point. The La Mahdiya movement the propagation of Islam, separatist group within Ahmadiyya movement that formed in 1914 as a result of ideological and administrative differences following the demise of Hakim Nur-ud-Din, the first caliph. And their scholar Muhammad Ali, not the boxer, a different Muhammad Ali, has estimated that Aisha was over 10 years old at the time of the marriage and over 15 at the time of its consummation. Okay, so there's a difference there, but still a minor in today's mindset, according to today's laws, etc., common law. Noting the reference to Aisha's age as either 9 or 10 or the age of consummation, American historian Denise Spielberg, no relation to Steven Spielberg, it's actually Spielberg, American scholar of Islamic history. She is a professor of history and Middle Eastern studies at the University of Texas, Austin, and she holds an AB in history from Smith College in 1980 and MA in philosophy, probably a Master of Philosophy, and a PhD, etc., probably in Middle Eastern studies. States that these specific references to the bride's age reinforce Aisha's pre-menarchal status and implicitly her virginity. She notes that Aisha herself seemed to promote the fact that she was a virgin before her marriage to Muhammad as a way to distinguish herself from his other non-virginal wives. This was of great importance to those who supported Aisha's position in the debate of the succession to Muhammad. These supporters considered that as Muhammad's only virgin wife, Aisha was divinely intended for him, and therefore the most credible regarding the debate. And in her relationship with Muhammad, in most Muslim traditions, the first wife is described as Muhammad's most beloved and favoured wife. Sunni traditions places Aisha as second only to Khadija. There are several hadiths or stories about the sayings of Muhammad that support this belief. One relates that when a companion asked Muhammad who was the person he loved most in the world, he responded Aisha. Others relate that Muhammad built Aisha's apartment so that her door opened directly into the mosque, and that she was the only woman with whom Muhammad received revelations. They bathed in the same water and he prayed while she lay stretched out in front of him. Various traditions reveal the mutual affection between Muhammad and Aisha. He would often just sit and watch her and friends play with dolls, and on occasion he would even join them. Well, he's a man that can get down on his knees and play with the kids, right? Yeah. Not in that sense. But yeah, whatever activities they're into, he involves himself in. Additionally, they were close enough to that each was able to discern the mood of the other, as many stories relate. It is also important to note that there exists evidence that Muhammad did not view himself as entirely superior to Aisha, at least not enough to prevent Aisha from speaking her mind, even at the risk of angering Muhammad. On one such instance, Muhammad's announcement of revelation, permitting him to enter into marriage is disallowed to other men, drew from her Aisha. Okay, from her, the retort: "It seemed to me your Lord, or your God, your Master, hastens to satisfy your desire." Furthermore, Muhammad and Aisha had a strong intellectual relationship. Muhammad valued her keen memory and intelligence, and so instructed his companions to draw some of their religious practices from her. We remember reading about a description of what Muhammad actually looked like, that he had brown hair put behind his ears, he had blue eyes and white skin. So be careful, if that's true, be careful, people that point the finger and say he was this, he was that, because a lot of your own people are actually like that today, right? Okay, so what we're saying here is, what we suggest here is, let's put aside, let's cast aside what we've been told and sold in relation to Muhammad to be the truth, as often it may not be, so we can hear and review exactly what the Quran actually has to say in the nearest English equivalent or translation, kept as close to the original Arabic text. We'll repeat that. Let us cast aside what we have been told and sold to be true, or to be the truth, in regards to Muhammad and Aisha, etc., as often it may not be true. So we can hear and review exactly what the Quran actually has to say in the nearest English equivalent, or translated into the nearest English equivalent by a reliant translator like that N.J. Dawood, keeping as close to the original Arabic text as possible. Let us prove, as many claim, it is a copy or clone of the Torah. Okay, let's verify that at some point. And the claim that the Prophet Muhammad was this or that in regards to Aisha, accusingly, as we get the impression that it is merely of or from a faction who have a hidden motive or agenda, or propagandists, right, who want to soil that particular religion. Okay, so propagandic, could be a propagandic move, right? Hidden or motive or agenda. Perhaps one faction is secretly trying to wipe out another, or one religion is trying to wipe out the other without them realizing it, so that in the future, at some point in the future, they will become the number one religion with no more competition or opposition, because they've killed off the other one, or the other ones, right? That's how they work. That's how they become number one, because they've got to poop on the other one, right? Kick them off the rungs of the ladder, so they remain at the top. It's all propaganda. One poops on the other, and that one poops on them. That's how it goes. Maybe they have hired a certain militant group to do all that extremist, horrific incidents that they've done. For these will do all, as hired mercenaries, as they love the power that it gives them and the money that they also receive, or they're receiving, right? So keep that in mind, so that your mind will be liberated, right? And you'll be able to see clearer. Rather than just point the finger, you know, on something you haven't done the personal research on. We've just taken it from some other horse's mouth, right? And say, oh, it must be true, right? Here, there is those arguments that, yeah, and the facts that, yeah, okay, he did marry young, etc., etc., right? But in those days, it's a completely different era, different mindset, you know, etc., for different reasons. Okay? Accusation of adultery. Aisha says she was a bit upset because he was always talking about his first wife, and she was such and such, and from her I had children. Aisha and Muhammad would often have races with each other. I had a race with him, the Prophet, and I outstripped him on my feet. When I became fleshy, or he got a bit fatter, gained some weight, she raced the Prophet, and he outstripped her. He said, "This is for that outstripping." So they got on really well. Yeah. Aisha was jealous of Khadija bint Khuwaylid, Muhammad's first wife, saying, "I did not feel jealous of any of the wives of the prophets as much as I did of Khadija, though I did not see her because she was long dead." The Prophet used to mention her very often, and whenever he slaughtered a sheep, he would cut its parts and send them to the women friends of Khadija. When she sometimes said to him, "You treat Khadija in such a way as if there is no woman on earth except Khadija," he would say, Khadija was such and such. And from her I had children. There you go. So that's the only thing that sort of upset her, right? The accusation of adultery. The story of the accusation of adultery levied against Aisha, also known as the event of Ifk, can be traced to Surah Chapter An-Nur of the Quran. As the story goes, Aisha left her hawdah, what's that? Bed carried by a camel, also known as a hathi hawdah, carriage which positioned on the back of an elephant or occasionally some other animal such as a camel. Yeah. To search for a missing necklace, her slaves mounted the hawdah and prepared it for travel without noticing any difference in weight. Without Aisha's presence, hence the caravan accidentally departed without her. She remained at the camp until the next morning when Safwan, this guy here, companion of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad, commander of the Muslim conquest, a nomad and member of Muhammad's army, found her and brought her back to person here, etc., etc. Muhammad came to speak directly with Aisha about the rumours. He was still sitting in her house when he announced that he had received a revelation from God confirming Aisha's innocence. Surah 24 details the Islamic laws and punishments regarding adultery and slander. Aisha's accusers were subjected to punishment of 80 lashes. So they were found out to be liars, right? Or false accusers. There's the death of Muhammad. After Muhammad's death, which ended Aisha and Muhammad's 14-year-long marriage, Aisha lived 50 more years in and around Medina. And she spent most of her time learning and acquiring knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad. Aisha was one of 3 wives, the other 2 being Hafsa bint Umar and Salama, who memorized the Quran. Like Hafsa, Aisha had her script of the Quran written after Muhammad's death. During Aisha's life, many prominent customs of Islam, such as veiling of women, began. Aisha's importance to revitalizing the Arab tradition and leadership among the Arab women highlights her magnitude within Islam. Aisha became involved in the politics of early Islam in the first 3 caliphates' reigns, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman or Uthman. During a time in Islam when women were not expected or wanted to contribute outside the household, Aisha delivered public speeches, became directly involved in a war and even battles, and helped both men and women to understand the practices of Muhammad. So maybe she created and enforced the hijab, is it? The veiling? A veil is an article of clothing or hanging cloth that is intended to cover some part of the head or face or an object of some significance. Note this, veiling has a long history in European, Asian and African societies. Yeah? It's been prominent in different cultures, right? In different countries, different cultures, and so forth. And it goes on about the role of the caliphs. And Uthman or Uthman, Uthman, and so forth. More about Aisha. And here's the she died in Mecca, in Medina on 17th Ramadan 58 AH, 16 July 678, 67 years old. Here's a Sunni view of Aisha. Sunnis believe she was Muhammad's favourite wife after Hazrat, his wife here, Khadijah. According to Sunni hadith reports, Muhammad saw Aisha in 2 dreams, in which he was shown that he would marry her. Shiite view of Aisha. The Shia view, Shia Islam or Shiism, second largest branch of Islam. Their view on Aisha is different than Sunni. They criticise her for opposing Ali during his caliphate in the Battle of the Camel, when she fought men from Ali's army in Basra. Okay, here's a citation here. Aisha was 18 years of age at the time when the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, died, and she remained a widow for 48 years till she died at the age of 67. She saw the rules of 4 caliphs in her lifetime. She died in Ramadan 58 AH during the caliphate of Muawiyah. Seeing the references here. It states here in this particular book or article, evidence that the Prophet waited for Aisha to reach physical maturity before consummation comes from Al-Tabari, who says she was too young for intercourse at the time of the marriage contract. Okay, so 1 minute he's saying she's 9 or 10, but then he's saying that she was too young to consummate that marriage. Make it official, huh? This is Esma Balas, 2012, Believing Woman in Islam and Reading Patriarchal Interpretations of the Quran, University of Texas Press, page 126. On the other hand, however, Muslims who calculate Aisha's age based on details of her sister Esma's age, about whom more is known, as well as details of the Hijrah, the Prophet's migration from Mecca to Medina, maintain that she was over 13 and perhaps between 17 and 19 when she got married. Such views cohere with those ahadith that claim that at her marriage Aisha had good knowledge of ancient Arabic poetry and genealogy and pronounced the fundamental rules of Arabic Islamic ethics. Okay, so that's like trying to state a fact or trying to throw you off course. Just with this poetry thing having nothing really to do with that. Here's some cited works. Further reading. Okay. You have a look at the word consummation to verify what it actually means. It could mean in Islam, consummation of marriage, al-kalwa, al-sahiha, occurs when the couple spend some time after the marriage in seclusion or isolation and or privacy, or together but alone. Right? Intercourse is not necessarily for consummation of marriage from an Islamic point of view. This is the agreed position of the Jamih? Can't really see it, so small. Jamhur, majority jurists, including the Hanafi, Maliki, etc. Okay, so that could be an Arabic interpretation of that actual word, the word in the Arabic. Whereas in the English, the word meaning destruction, completion, or failing, so Isaiah 10:23, 28:22, Daniel 9:27, is translated interchangeably in the King James Version for another Hebrew word referring to a physical disease, and best translated consumption. Compare Leviticus 26:16, Deuteronomy 28:22, not used in the Revised Version, British and American. Consummation Definition: the act of making a marriage or romantic relationship complete by having sex. The act of. Okay. Action, cessation, close, commission, conclusion, consequence, discharge, end, expiration, etc. The act of consummating, fulfillment, an ultimate goal or end. And here's consummation in legislation, civil marriage, etc. And so forth. So, we're hoping that you found this interesting. We'll be interested in your comments and related to this. Okay, keep it civil. We won't tolerate anyone that's just being a complete clown or troll. Be mature. You can understand if you're about 5 years old or something like that. Yeah. Or pre-teen or something. Right? Keep it civil, keep it mature. Or else we'll block you. Right? Okay.
The cow. In the name of God, the compassionate, merciful. This book is not to be doubted. It is a guide for the righteous who believe in the unseen and are steadfast in prayer, who give in alms from what we gave them, who believe in what has been revealed to you and what was revealed before you, and have absolute faith in the life to come. These are rightly guided by their Lord. These shall surely triumph. As for the unbelievers, it is the same whether or not you forewarn them. They will not have faith. God has set a seal upon their hearts and ears. Their sight is dimmed, and grievous punishment awaits them. There are some who declare, we believe in God and the last day, yet they are no true believers. They seek to deceive God and those who believe in Him. But they deceive none save themselves, though they may not perceive it. There is a sickness in their hearts, which God has aggravated. They shall be sternly punished for the lies they tell. When they are told, you shall not do evil in the land, they reply, surely we are doing only what is good. But it is they who are the evildoers, though they may not perceive it. And when they are told, believe as others believe, they reply, are we to believe as fools believe? It is they who are the fools, if they but knew it. When they meet the faithful, they declare, we too are believers. But when alone with their devils, they say to them, we follow none but you, we were only mocking. God will mock them, and keep them long in sin, ever straying from the right path.
So again, we hope that you enjoyed this video, that it brought some light, right? As we suggested, let's cast aside our bias, prejudices, our hatred, etc. Told us, sold us by the media in regards to 9/11, etc., etc. Whether it be true or not that they actually did those atrocities, or it's just someone in power trying to put the blame on somebody else, right, when they did it themselves, etc., etc. So we can see, we could be totally liberated in the mind, you know, and treat those who are faithful followers of Islam, the Muslims, etc., not the ones that are like, you know, totally bomb mad, etc., etc., as human beings, because at the end of the day, that's what they are. We're all on the same planet. There's plenty of dirt in the sandpit that we can play with, right? There's no need for this constant bickering, fighting, infighting, outfighting, you know, bias, prejudice, racism, hatred, etc. Why can't we all get on? We're all on the same planet. We can't get off the planet, apparently. So yeah, why make life hell for other people, right? And vice versa. Let's think, act, and talk maturely, right? Get together as one person, as one people, human beings, right? It's one way to change the world, or at least change the world of the people around you. Okay, so we are the Ministry of the Real Truth, bringing you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but that truth. No hype, no fluff, no other BS. Right. So subscribe to us, add your comments, give us a like. We want to keep your comments mature, or else you'll face our wrath. No, you do. Yeah, and then share this video with your Muslim, Christian, Jewish friends, neighbours, family, strangers, etc. and tell them to come and look at our channel, the Ministry of the Real Truth.